Welcome, dear viewers, to a chilling tapestry woven from the threads of terrifying tales that defy the rational and embrace terror. In the shadows that cloak our deepest fears, these stories emerge like specters from the darkest recesses of the human psyche. Prepare to be ensnared by the inescapable grasp of the unknown as each tale unfolds with a malevolent grace of its own.
As the clock struck midnight, I found myself walking alone down a dimly lit street. The moon was veiled by thick clouds, casting an eerie, unnatural darkness upon the world. A chill crept down my spine, and my footsteps echoed ominously against the deserted pavement. I had taken this route home countless times before, but tonight something felt different. An unsettling silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant howling of a solitary dog. My heart began to race, but I brushed it off as paranoia, the product of watching too many horror films. The street lamps flickered erratically, creating grotesque shadows that danced around me. Every corner I turned seemed to hold a lurking threat. My phone's feeble flashlight did little to dispel the overwhelming darkness that encroached on my path. As I walked further, I heard faint whispers that seemed to originate from the depths of the shadows. My pace quickened, and I kept my gaze fixed firmly ahead. But the whispers persisted, growing louder and more sinister, as if a congregation of malevolent spirits had gathered to torment me. I tried to shake off the feeling that I was being watched, but the sensation gnawed at my psyche. Each step became a struggle against the encroaching panic. The neighborhood, once familiar and comforting, had transformed into a labyrinth of dread. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the alleyway, extinguishing the feeble light of my flashlight. I stood in utter darkness, paralyzed with fear. The whispers intensified, now morphing into a sinister chant, a cacophony of haunting voices that seemed to come from all directions. I fumbled for my phone, fingers trembling as I desperately tried to reignite the flashlight. When the pale glow returned, I found myself face to face with a grotesque figure. It loomed over me, its features obscured by tattered rags and disheveled hair. Its eyes were hollow pits of darkness, and its gnarled fingers reached out toward me. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. My instincts screamed at me to flee, to escape from this nightmarish encounter. As I turned to run, I realized I was surrounded. More of these shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, their eyes gleaming with malevolent hunger. I sprinted down the deserted street, the chilling whispers and unnatural chants echoing in my ears. My breaths came in ragged gasps as I raced toward the faint glow of civilization in the distance. The figures pursued, their movements unnatu.
Feeling a bit uneasy, are you? No? Well, perhaps the following tale will leave you yearning for the comforting glow of a nightlight tonight.
Working the night shift at a quiet gas station on the outskirts of town seemed like a good idea when I took the job. I figured it would be a peaceful way to make some extra cash while the rest of the world slept. Little did I know that those long, dark hours would become a descent into terror that I would never forget. My first few nights on the job were uneventful. The steady hum of the gas pumps and the occasional car passing through provided the only company. I kept myself busy by stocking shelves and occasionally watching a movie on my laptop. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice something strange. It started with subtle noises, a faint scratching coming from the storage room in the back, the soft chime of the bell above the door, even though no one had entered. I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me in the quiet of the night. One night, as I was sitting behind the counter, engrossed in a movie, the power went out. The store was plunged into darkness, and my heart began to race. I fumbled for my phone, using its flashlight to guide me to the circuit breaker. When I flipped the switch, the lights came back on, but something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I scanned the store, my eyes landing on the security camera monitor. The screen displayed an empty parking lot, but then the image flickered, and I saw a shadowy figure moving just out of the camera's view. My blood ran cold as I watched the figure move closer to the store. I grabbed a baseball bat from behind the counter and cautiously approached the entrance. The bell above the door chimed again, even though I hadn't opened it. I peered outside, but there was no one there. My heart pounded in my chest as I retreated back behind the counter, my mind racing with fear and confusion. As the nights passed, the strange occurrences escalated. Items on the shelves would be rearranged when I returned to them, and I often heard whispered voices in the aisles when I knew I was alone. The scratching sound from the storage room became more pronounced, as though something was trying to claw its way out. One particularly chilling night, a customer walked in. I greeted him with a forced smile, but there was something off about him. He moved slowly, his eyes darting around the store as if he were searching for something. When he finally approached the counter, I noticed his clothes were tattered and covered in dirt. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure. He looked at me with hollow eyes and whispered, "They're coming." Before I could respond, he turned and hurried out of the store, the bell chiming above the door. I watched him through the window as he disappeared into the darkness, and a shiver ran down my spine. The nights grew longer and more unbearable, sleep-deprived and tormented by the increasing strangeness of my surroundings. I considered quitting, but the need for money and the fear of what might happen if I left kept me rooted to that lonely gas station. One night, as I was restocking the shelves, I heard a loud crash from the storage room. I cautiously approached the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I swung it open, and my blood turned to ice. Inside the storage room, the shelves were in disarray, and a gaping hole had been torn through the wall. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was as if something had burst forth from the room, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. I heard a low growl from behind me, and I turned to see a creature unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a twisted, nightmarish figure, its skin mottled and decayed, with elongated limbs and sharp, gnarled claws. Its eyes burned with a malevolent hunger as it approached me. In sheer panic, I swung the baseball bat at the creature, striking it in the head. It let out an ear-piercing screech and retreated back into the darkness of the storage room. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and bolted from the gas station, never looking back. I never returned to that gas station, and I never found out what happened to the creature that had emerged from the storage room. The nightmares of those long, harrowing nights still haunt me, and I can't help but wonder if there are other places, other gas stations, where the darkness hides secrets that should never see the light of day.
Are you peeing your pants yet? Feel free to verify. I'll patiently wait for 3 seconds. Now, do you happen to be a movie enthusiast? This tale might just make you reconsider your preferences.
I had always been a fan of horror movies, so when I heard about a small, obscure movie theater hidden deep within the city that screened the most terrifying films ever made, I couldn't resist the temptation to check it out. They called it the Shadowland Cinema, and it was said to be a place where only the bravest dared to venture. Little did I know that my curiosity would lead me to a nightmarish experience I would never forget. The theater was unlike any I had ever seen. It was nestled in the heart of an old, rundown building that seemed to have been forgotten by time itself. The marquee was faded, and the neon lights that once spelled out the cinema's name flickered erratically. The entrance was shrouded in darkness, and the air carried a musty scent of old popcorn and mildew. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to turn back, but my love for horror films urged me forward. I purchased a ticket from the disinterested cashier and made my way down a narrow, dimly lit corridor that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were adorned with faded movie posters from decades past, their colors muted by time and neglect. The theater itself was equally unsettling. It was nearly empty, save for a few scattered patrons who sat in eerie silence, their eyes fixed on the flickering screen. The seats were tattered, and the floor was sticky with spilled drinks. It was clear that this place had seen better days. I took a seat in the middle of the theater, feeling a chill run down my spine as the dim lights overhead flickered and went out. The screen remained the only source of illumination, casting eerie shadows on the faces of the other moviegoers. The anticipation in the room was palpable. The film that began to play was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a black and white masterpiece of horror, filled with grotesque creatures, nightmarish landscapes, and a sense of dread that hung in the air like a suffocating fog. The audience was spellbound, unable to look away from the screen, even as the terror on it escalated to unimaginable heights. As the movie reached its climax, I felt a sudden and overwhelming sense of unease. It was as if the horror on the screen had transcended the boundaries of fiction and seeped into the theater itself. The air grew colder, and I could hear faint whispers in the darkness. I glanced around, but the other patrons remained fixed in their seats, their eyes glued to the screen. I turned my attention back to the movie, unable to tear my gaze away. The tension was unbearable, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. Just as the film reached its most horrifying moment, the screen went black, and the theater was plunged into darkness. Panic swept over me as I fumbled for my phone, using its feeble light to try to find my way to the exit. But the corridor seemed to have vanished, replaced by an endless, twisting labyrinth of crumbling walls and shattered mirrors. I stumbled through the darkness, my heart pounding with fear. The whispers grew louder, filling the air with a cacophony of haunting voices. I could hear my name being called from all directions, each voice more sinister than the last. I quickened my pace, desperate to escape the nightmarish maze. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I stumbled upon a door. With trembling hands, I pushed it open and stepped into a room that was even darker than the labyrinth. I could hear heavy breathing, and I knew I was not alone. Suddenly, a blinding light flooded the room, and I found myself face to face with the other patrons from the theater. But their faces were twisted with grotesque, inhuman features, their eyes glowing with malevolent hunger. They reached out for me, their fingers elongated into sharp, gnarled claws. I screamed and turned to flee, but the door had vanished, leaving me trapped with these monstrous beings. They closed in on me, their whispers now a deafening roar in my ears. And then, just as they were about to close in for the kill, the lights flickered back on, and the theater reappeared around me. I was back in my seat, surrounded by the same disinterested patrons who had been there when I arrived. The screen showed the final moments of the movie, and the credits began to roll. The other moviegoers stood up and filed out of the theater, as if nothing had happened. I stumbled out of my seat, my mind reeling with confusion and terror. As I made my way to the exit, I turned to look back at the screen one last time. The credits had stopped rolling, and the screen displayed a single message. "Welcome to the Shadowland Cinema. We hope you enjoyed the show." My heart sank as I realized that I had just experienced a nightmare within a nightmare. The theater had played tricks on my mind, subjecting me to a horrifying ordeal that felt all too real. I fled from the Shadowland Cinema, vowing never to return. The memory of that night still haunts me, a chilling reminder that sometimes the line between reality and horror can blur in the most unexpected and terrifying ways.
Now that's my kind of theater. Any reflections or comments you'd like to add? Feel free to jot them down below. Anyway, I hope these tales sent you sprinting to seek comfort from your mother. As for sleeping tonight, I won't hold it against you if you struggle, but personally, I'll slumber as soundly as the deceased. Don't forget to inspect beneath your bed tonight. One can never be too sure. Now, I wonder if that gas station that gave that lady such a fright is still open. I'm quite thirsty. On that note, this is Night Terror signing off.